Before we get started, please like and subscribe. Let me know where you're watching from, and you can support the channel by clicking thanks or joining. I almost didn't go to the party. That detail matters, because if I had trusted the hesitation I felt standing in my apartment doorway on December 31st, everything that followed might never have happened. The invitation had arrived 3 weeks earlier, printed on thick black cardstock with silver lettering that reflected the light just enough to feel intentional. Marcus Hale's annual New Year's Eve party was not the kind of event people declined. It was spoken about in offices, whispered about at bars, and referenced long after January ended. People didn't just attend, they were seen there. The location alone made it legendary. Marcus owned the top 3 floors of a renovated high-rise overlooking the river, floor-to-ceiling windows, private elevators, a view of the city that made you feel as if you were floating above it, rather than living inside it. I told myself that was why I said yes. By the time I arrived just after 10 p.m., the building was already alive. The private elevator hummed upward, smooth and silent, the numbers lighting up one by one with every floor. My chest tightened in a way I couldn't explain. Anticipation, I assumed, or nerves. The doors opened directly into the penthouse. Warm light spilled out, gold and soft, accompanied by music that vibrated through the floor before I even stepped inside. The living room was enormous, stretching farther than seemed architecturally reasonable, broken up by clusters of people holding crystal glasses and laughing too loudly. Marcus spotted me almost immediately. He always did. Tall, immaculately dressed, smile sharp but practiced. He crossed the room with the ease of someone who never questioned whether they belonged anywhere. He greeted me by name, clapped a hand on my shoulder, and welcomed me as if I were an old friend rather than a professional acquaintance. "You made it," he said. "Good. Tonight should be unforgettable." Something about the way he said unforgettable made my stomach tighten. I laughed it off and accepted a drink from a passing server. Champagne already poured. I noticed then that there were no bottles visible anywhere. No bar, no refills, just endless glasses appearing in people's hands. The crowd was carefully curated. Tech executives, artists, influencers, a few politicians pretending not to be politicians. Everyone looked exceptional. Everyone looked awake in that way people do when they expect something important to happen. I recognized Olivia near the windows, already tipsy, waving me over. Daniel stood beside her, checking his watch compulsively. "Marcus is outdoing himself this year," Olivia said, gesturing at the room. "He promised something special after midnight. Fireworks." I asked. Daniel shook his head. He wouldn't be that obvious. As the night wore on, the energy shifted. The music grew louder, more rhythmic, pulsing through the space rather than simply playing. Conversations became harder to follow. Laughter stretched too long. Just a second passed natural. I drank more than I intended to, though I never felt drunk. That was another strange thing. My body felt light, alert, almost sharpened, as if the alcohol was doing the opposite of what it should. At some some point, I realized I hadn't checked my phone in a while. That realization came with a jolt of unease. I reached into my pocket, expecting to feel its familiar weight. It wasn't there. I told myself I must have left it on a table. Still, a cold thread of anxiety settled in my chest. I excused myself and began scanning the room, weaving between conversations, glancing at surfaces. That was when I noticed the doors near the back of the penthouse, partially concealed by a sheer black curtain, were a set of double doors I hadn't seen earlier. They were taller than the others, matte black, unmarked. People drifted toward them without seeming to notice they were doing it. One by one, guests would pause mid-conversation, fall silent, and then turn, drawn by something invisible. They slipped through the doors and disappeared. No one commented on it. I tried to ask Olivia about it, but she didn't seem to hear me. Her smile remained fixed, her eyes unfocused, as if she were listening to something else entirely. The countdown clock appeared shortly before midnight. It was projected onto the far wall, large white numbers hovering over the crowd. The room slowly reoriented around it. Conversations died down. People gathered closer together, faces tilted upward. 10. The music softened, its rhythm slowing to match the numbers. 9. I felt a sudden pressure in my ears, like descending too quickly in an airplane. 8. The lights dimmed slightly. The windows reflected our faces back at us. Dozens of overlapping expressions, all eerily similar. 7. Someone took my hand. I didn't see who. 6. The air felt thick, heavy, carrying a faint scent I couldn't place. Wax, maybe, or smoke. 5. I realized then that the double doors were open. 4. Beyond them was darkness, deeper than any shadow in the penthouse should have been. 3. A low sound began to build beneath the music. Not quite a hum, not quite a voice. 2. My heart was racing. I tried to pull my hand free, but the grip tightened. 1. The room erupted in cheers, glasses raised, bodies pressing close, confetti cannons fired, showering the space in silver. Happy New Year. For a fraction of a second, everything felt normal again. Then the lights went out. Not completely, just enough to plunge the room into a dim, red-tinted glow. The countdown clock vanished. The music cut off mid-beat. In the silence that followed, I heard whispering, not words, numbers, spoken softly, out of order, overlapping, hands pressed against my shoulders, guiding me forward. Toward the doors. I wanted to scream, I wanted to fight, but my body didn't respond the way it should have. My limbs felt distant, as if the commands from my brain were arriving late. The darkness beyond the doors swallowed us. The last thing I remember clearly is Marcus's voice, close to my ear. "Don't worry," he said calmly. "You won't remember a thing." The morning after the party arrived quietly, almost politely, as if the city itself was unsure whether it should wake us at all. I opened my eyes on my own bed, fully dressed, shoes still on, head pounding with a dull, persistent ache that felt older than a hangover. For a long moment, I did not move. I listened to the sounds of the apartment, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant traffic. The normality of it all felt staged, like a set built too carefully. My phone lay on my chest. It was dead. That alone made my stomach tighten. I never let my phone die, not on a normal night, and certainly not on New Year's Eve. When I plugged it in, the screen lit up immediately. No low battery warning, no missed call alerts, no notifications at all. The time read January 1st, 8:43 a.m. I scrolled through my messages. Nothing after 11:49 p.m. The last thing I had sent was a photo of the city skyline from the penthouse balcony fireworks, just beginning to bloom in the distance. After that, there was nothing. No midnight message, no Happy New Year, no proof that the most important moment of the night had ever happened. In the bathroom mirror, I barely recognized myself. My eyes were bloodshot, my expression distant, as if part of me was still somewhere else thinking about something I could not quite reach. When I stepped into the shower, I noticed a faint red mark around my wrist. Not a bruise, not a cut, more like pressure, as if something had held me there for a long time. I tried to remember the countdown. 10, 9, 8. My mind went blank. At the coffee shop downstairs, the television played highlights from New Year's celebrations around the country. Times Square, crowds screaming, fireworks exploding, music swelling. It all felt unreal, like footage from another world. Daniel was already there, sitting at our usual table. He looked worse than I felt. "You remember anything?" he asked without preamble. I shook my head. "Not after the fireworks started," I said. "It is just empty." Olivia arrived moments later, her face pale, her movements careful, like she was afraid of breaking something fragile inside herself. She sat down and wrapped her hands around her cup without drinking. "I keep thinking I dreamed it," she said. "The room, the candles, the way the sound stopped. But then I wake up and it feels more real than this." Daniel leaned closer, lowering his voice. "I checked the guest list," he said. "The party does not exist. There is no record of it anywhere. No photos, no event page. Nothing." That was when the unease turned into fear. A man at the next table laughed too loudly, the sound sharp enough to make me flinch. I realized then that every loud noise felt wrong, as if the world had been turned up too suddenly. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Did you enjoy the evening?" I stared at the screen. My fingers felt numb. "Do not reply," Olivia said immediately. Another message followed. "Memory settles best when undisturbed." Daniel stood abruptly, knocking his chair back. "This is not normal," he said. "Someone is messing with us." Outside, the city looked unchanged, but something in it felt strained. Traffic lights lingered too long on red pedestrians, hesitated before crossing, even when the signal told them to go. As we walked, I felt a strange sensation like pressure behind my eyes whenever I tried to focus on the night before. We reached the building where the party had been held, or where we thought it had been. The lobby was quiet, too quiet for New Year's Day. The front desk clerk looked up at us with mild confusion. "Can I help you?" We asked about the party, the penthouse, the event. He smiled politely. "There was no party here last night," he said. "The elevator doors opened behind us on their own." Inside, the panel showed the penthouse button glowing faintly. None of us pressed it. The doors closed. The elevator began to rise. eyes. My heart hammered as the numbers climbed. Each floor felt heavier than the last, like we were moving against gravity instead of with it. When the doors opened, the hallway lights flickered. The air was cold. The carpet bore faint circular impressions as if something heavy had been placed there repeatedly. At the end of the hall, the penthouse door stood slightly open. From inside came a low, rhythmic sound, not music, not voices, something closer to breathing. Daniel took a step forward. Then his phone rang. He froze. I could not see the screen, but I saw his face drain of color. "I have to take this," he said quietly. He stepped inside alone. The door closed behind him. The sound stopped. When we pushed the door open, seconds later, the penthouse was empty. No furniture, no candles, no Daniel, only a faint warmth in the center of the room and the lingering sense that something had just finished listening. That was the moment I understood. The night was not over. It had simply moved on without us. By the time I reached Olivia's apartment, the sky outside had turned the dull gray of a city that hadn't fully woken up yet. January 1st always carried that strange stillness, like the world was recovering from a collective excess. But this felt different. It felt staged. Olivia opened the door before I had a chance to knock. She looked worse than I felt. Her hair was still tangled. Dark circles clung stubbornly beneath her eyes, and she wore an oversized sweater that swallowed her frame. The moment she saw me, relief flickered across her face, followed quickly by something else. Fear. "You came alone?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "Why?" She stepped aside and locked the door behind me, twisting the deadbolt with more force than necessary. "Because I don't trust who might be watching," she said. Her apartment smelled like burnt coffee and antiseptic. On the coffee table sat a half-empty first aid kit, its contents scattered carelessly. Bandages, alcohol wipes, a roll of medical tape. "You're hurt," I said. She hesitated, then pulled up the hem of her sweater. Dark bruises bloomed across her ribs, finger-shaped and uneven, like someone had gripped her hard while she struggled. "I woke up like this," she said quietly. "I don't remember getting home. I don't remember leaving the party. But my body remembers something." I nodded. I understood that feeling all too well. She handed me her phone. "Watch this," she said. It was a video file, time-stamped at 12:14 a.m. The footage was grainy, shot from a corner of Marcus's penthouse. The angle was wrong, too high, as if the camera had been mounted deliberately rather than held by a guest. The living room was empty, no music. No laughter, just silence. Then people began to enter the frame, not walking, being guided. I saw myself first. My head hung low, eyes half closed. Two figures flanked me, their faces obscured by shadow, hands firm on my arms. Behind me came Olivia, Daniel, and others I recognized, all of us moving in the same slow, synchronized way toward the black doors. "What is that?" I whispered. "I found it in my phone this morning," Olivia said. "I didn't record it. I don't even know how it got there." The video continued. Beyond the doors was a room I had never seen before. Circular, vast. The walls were lined with tall candles, their flames burning unnaturally steady. The floor was etched with symbols carved directly into the stone. forming concentric rings around a central platform. At the center stood Marcus. He was no longer smiling. He raised his hands, and the figures guiding us stepped back. We stood on our own then, swaying slightly, eyes unfocused. Marcus began to speak. The audio was distorted, but certain words cut through. Threshold, witness, offering. My stomach churned. The video ended abruptly, cutting to black. I handed the phone back, my hands shaking. That room doesn't exist, I said. I have been in that building dozens of times. I know, Olivia replied. I checked the blueprints online. There is no circular room on any floor. A heavy silence settled between us. Marcus called me. She continued. He says everything's fine, that we drank too much, that nothing unusual happened, and you believe him. She laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. No, she said, because Daniel is missing. The words hit me like a punch. What do you mean missing? He never came home. She said, his sister called me an hour ago. His phone goes straight to voicemail. His car is still parked in the garage at Marcus's building. Images from the video replayed in my mind. The circle, the candles, the way we stood there. Compliant. Maybe he left early, I said weakly. Olivia shook her head. He was there, she said, in the room. I saw him. I felt the walls closing in. A notification chimed on my phone. A new message from Marcus. Hope you're feeling better. We should all get together tonight and laugh about how wild things got. My chest tightened. That's not an invitation, Olivia said, reading over my shoulder. That's a test. She was right. Marcus needed to know who remembered, or rather, who was starting to remember. I left Olivia's apartment shortly after, my mind racing. The city streets felt unfamiliar, like the set of a movie after filming had stopped. People moved, but their faces seemed distant. Disconnected. As I crossed the street, a sudden flash of memory hit me. Cold stone beneath my bare feet, the smell of burning wax, a voice counting, slow and deliberate. I staggered, gripping a lamppost to steady myself. The memory wasn't returning on its own. It was being pushed. That night, I dreamed. I stood in the circular room again. Candles flickered around me, casting towering shadows on the walls. Marcus stood opposite me, his expression calm, almost reverent. You were chosen, he said. For what? I asked. To remember, he replied. I woke up gasping for air, my sheets soaked with sweat. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. Another message, this time from the unknown number. It's starting to come back, isn't it? I didn't reply to Marcus. That decision alone felt dangerous, like stepping out of line in a game whose rules I didn't fully understand. Marcus Hale was not a man people ignored. He noticed absence the way others noticed noise. Instead, I spent the afternoon doing something I hadn't planned on doing at all. I went back to the building. The high-rise loomed over the street, its glass facade reflecting the pale winter sky. From the outside, it looked the same as it always had. Expensive, imposing, untouched by whatever had happened inside it just hours earlier. The doorman recognized me instantly. Rough night, he asked with a polite smile. Something like that, I replied. Did a lot of people leave late? He chuckled. New Year's Eve always runs long up there. Did everyone leave? I pressed. His smile faltered. just slightly. Eventually, he said, yes. The elevator ride felt longer than usual. Each passing floor tightened the knot in my stomach. When the doors opened to the penthouse level, I half expected to see the place sealed off, crawling with police tape or cleaning crews. Instead, it looked immaculate. Too immaculate. The penthouse had been reset. No glasses, no confetti, no trace of a party that had hosted over 100 people. The air smelled faintly of citrus and something sharper beneath it. Like bleach, Marcus stood near the windows, phone pressed to his ear. He ended the call when he saw me. I was wondering when you'd show up, he said pleasantly. I was starting to worry. You said we should talk. I replied, and we will, he said, but not here. He gestured toward the back of the penthouse. The black curtain was gone. In its place was a smooth white wall. No, I said before I could stop myself. Marcus tilted his head. Something wrong. The doors, I said. They were right there. He followed my gaze, then smiled. You must be confusing this place with somewhere else, he said. There's never been anything there. The confidence in his voice was unsettling. Daniel's missing, I said. That got a reaction. Not shock, not concern. Recognition. Daniel had a choice, Marcus said calmly. Just like all of you did. My heart pounded. What does that mean? It means, Marcus replied, stepping closer, that not everyone leaves the same way they arrive. Before I could respond, he turned and walked away, dismissing me as if the conversation were over. I didn't follow him. Instead, I did something reckless. I waited. After Marcus disappeared into another room, I moved quickly, checking doors, scanning walls, running my hands along smooth surfaces where I knew something had once been hidden. When my fingers brushed a seam in the wall, my breath caught. There, perfectly flush, invisible unless you knew where to look. I pressed. The wall shifted silently, revealing a narrow opening. Beyond it, a staircase descended into darkness. The air that drifted up was cold and stale, carrying the unmistakable scent of wax. I descended slowly, each step echoing too loudly in the enclosed space. The light from above vanished behind me, swallowed by the dark. At the bottom, the staircase opened into the circular room. Seeing it in person was worse than the video. The walls curved inward slightly, creating a sense of compression, like the room itself was watching. The candles burned again, arranged in the same concentric pattern. Melted wax pooled at their bases, thick and layered, evidence of repeated use. This wasn't a one-time event. Symbols covered the floor, their edges worn smooth by countless feet. At the center stood a stone slab, its surface scratched and stained dark. I stepped closer and felt a sudden wave of nausea. I knew this place, not consciously, but my body reacted as if it had been here many times before. A sound echoed behind me. Slow applause. Marcus emerged from the shadows, his expression unreadable. I hoped you'd come looking, he said. Curiosity always brings the right people back. You drugged us, I said. You erased our memories. Marcus shook his head. No, he said. We didn't erase anything. We simply made room. For what? For the passage, he replied. He gestured to the symbols. Every year, at the turning point, Marcus continued, There's an opening, a moment when the boundary thins. Most people pass through it unaware. We help them cross properly. And Daniel, Marcus's gaze hardened. Some people cross too far. Cold dread flooded my veins. "You're killing people," I said. Marcus smiled sadly. "No," he corrected. "We're choosing who gets to stay." The candles flared suddenly, their flames stretching unnaturally tall. The symbols on the floor seemed to pulse, as if responding to my presence. "You remember more than the others," Marcus said. "That makes you valuable." Footsteps echoed above us. More people were coming. I backed away, my heel striking the stone slab. Pain exploded up my leg, and with it, another memory surged forward. Hands holding me down, a voice asking a question I couldn't hear, my own voice answering yes. I turned and ran. Behind me, Marcus's voice followed. Calm and certain. "You already agreed," he said. "You just don't remember when." I didn't stop running until my lungs burned. I burst out of the building and into the cold January air, the city slamming back into focus all at once. Car horns, footsteps, a distant siren, normal sounds, impossibly loud after the suffocating quiet below Marcus's penthouse. I didn't look back. Only when I was 3 blocks away did I finally slow down, bending over with my hands on my knees, fighting the urge to vomit. My hands were shaking so badly I had to clench them into fists. "You already agreed." Marcus's words replayed in my head on a loop. I had agreed. Some version of me, at least. A version I couldn't remember being. I pulled out my phone and dialed Olivia. She answered immediately. "Tell me you're not at his building," she said. "I was," I replied. "I'm not anymore." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. "You saw it, didn't you?" she said. "The room." "Yes." "And Daniel, I think he's gone," I said. "Not missing, not hiding. Gone." Silence followed. Then, quietly, "I knew it. We agreed to meet somewhere public. Neutral, somewhere Marcus wouldn't expect. I chose a 24-hour diner on the edge of downtown, the kind of place that smelled like old coffee and disinfectant, where the fluorescent lights never turned off and no one asked questions. Olivia arrived 10 minutes after me. She slid into the booth across from me, her eyes darting around the room before settling on my face. "You look worse," she said. "Back at you." She wrapped her hands around a mug of coffee. Though she didn't drink it, "I've been remembering things," she said. "Not clearly, not all at once, but enough. So have I," I admitted. She nodded. "Do you remember the question?" My stomach dropped. "Yes," I said. "I just don't remember what it was asking. That's the trick," Olivia replied. "They don't ask you if you want to join a cult. They ask you something you can't refuse." She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "They asked me if I wanted to wake up on January 1st still being the same person. A chill crawled up my spine. "And you said yes." "So did you," she said. "We all did." The waitress arrived, interrupting us. She poured more coffee into our mugs, her movements slow and mechanical. As she walked away, I noticed something strange. She had faint pressure marks on her wrists, just like mine. I watched her disappear behind the counter, my heart pounding. "It's not just us," I whispered. "How many people do you think have been through this?" Olivia's expression darkened, enough to keep it going every year. She said. My phone buzzed. Another message from Marcus. You're running out of time. I didn't show Olivia. I didn't need to. I think the remembering is the point, she said suddenly. I think it's not a side effect. It's part of it. What do you mean? If we remember, she said, we're closer to crossing fully. That made horrifying sense. The memories weren't coming back randomly. They were being unlocked, piece by piece. I closed my eyes, focusing inward, letting one of the flashes surface instead of pushing it away. I saw the circle again, the candles, the slab, but this time I saw beyond it. Behind Marcus stood others, men and women of different ages, dressed in the same muted colors, calm, watching. They weren't guests, they were facilitators. We weren't the first group, I said, and we won't be the last. Olivia's jaw tightened. So what do we do? I didn't have an answer. The truth settled over us slowly, heavy and unavoidable. The ritual wasn't meant to kill everyone. It was meant to select, and those who were selected were being reshaped into something that could guide the next group through. Marcus hadn't been born into this. He had been chosen once, just like us. I think Daniel refused, Olivia said suddenly. At the last moment, I think that's why he didn't come back. Fear twisted in my chest. And what happens to those who don't refuse? We both knew the answer. They became part of the structure. My phone vibrated again. A final message from the unknown number. Meet me. I can help you remember how to say no. I looked up at Olivia. My decision already made. Done yet, I said. No, she agreed. We're just getting started. We didn't tell anyone where we were going. That felt important, even if we couldn't fully explain why. The message from the unknown number had included an address and a time. No name, no explanation, just a location on the far west side of the city and 2 words that echoed in my head the entire drive. Come alone. We didn't. Olivia insisted on coming with me, and I didn't argue. Whatever waited for us at that address, facing it separately felt like exactly what Marcus would want. The building was an old community center slated for demolition, its brick exterior scarred by decades of neglect. The parking lot was nearly empty, illuminated by a single flickering street light. This feels like a bad idea, Olivia said. They all do, I replied. Inside, the air smelled of dust and cold concrete. Steps echoed down the hallway as we followed the sound of distant movement. We found him in the gymnasium. He sat alone on the bleachers, hands clasped tightly together, head bowed. When he looked up, my breath caught. It was Daniel. He looked thinner, older. His eyes were sharp in a way they hadn't been before, like someone who had seen something and never stopped seeing it. You shouldn't be here, he said quietly. You're alive, Olivia breathed. Not the way you mean, Daniel replied. He explained quickly, urgently, as if time itself were a threat. Daniel had refused. At the final moment, when the question had been asked and the room waited for an answer, he said no. The consequence wasn't death, it was exile. They pushed me through, he said, not forward, sideways. He described waking up in places that didn't quite exist, empty versions of familiar rooms, streets without reflections, people who moved but left no impressions behind. I was stuck between, Daniel said, close enough to see, far enough that they couldn't pull me back. Marcus couldn't retrieve him, but he could still influence him. They're accelerating it, Daniel said. The remembering. If you remember too much, too fast, you cross whether you want to or not. My chest tightened. So how do we stop it? Olivia asked. Daniel looked at me. You already know the answer, he said. The question, the one we'd been asked. It only works. Daniel continued. If you answer it the way they expect, if you answer it from fear, from desire. He stood, stepping closer. To say no, you have to remember the question and reject its framing. And what was it? I asked. Daniel met my gaze. Do you want to stay human after tonight? The words landed like a blow, because of course I had said yes. Who wouldn't? That's the trap, Daniel said. They don't change you all at once. They give you exactly what you think you're protecting. A noise echoed down the hallway. Footsteps, multiple. Daniel's expression hardened. They've found you, he said. They always do. He shoved a folded piece of paper into my hand. Write it down, he said. The real answer, before they make you forget again. What happens to you? Olivia asked. Daniel smiled sadly. I stay where I am, he said, and hope you don't join me. The lights flickered. I felt it then. The pull, the same pressure from the penthouse, tightening around my thoughts. We ran. Outside, the city seemed distorted. Edges too sharp, colors slightly wrong. My phone buzzed repeatedly in my pocket, but I didn't look, not until we were safe. Trembled in my hand. On it, in my own handwriting, were the words I didn't remember writing. I do not accept the question. The city did not want us to remember. That was the thought that settled in my mind as the hours after meeting Daniel began to unravel. It wasn't paranoia. It was pattern recognition. Street signs seemed unfamiliar. Storefronts I had passed 100 times looked subtly wrong, their names rearranged just enough to make my head ache when I tried to focus. By morning, Olivia was gone. I woke up on my couch with my phone buzzing in my hand and the taste of copper in my mouth. For a brief, terrifying moment, I couldn't remember where I was or how I'd gotten there. The apartment felt foreign, like a set built to resemble my life. My phone displayed 17 missed calls, all from Olivia. The last message was time-stamped at 3:12 a.m. He knows. If I forget, don't come looking. Panic flooded my chest. I called her immediately, straight to voicemail. I tried again. Nothing. I grabbed my jacket and the folded paper Daniel had given me. The words were still there, written in my handwriting, grounding me. I do not accept the question. I repeated it under my breath like a mantra as I made my way across the city to Olivia's apartment. The door was unlocked. That alone told me everything I needed to know. Inside, the place was spotless. Too clean. The first aid kit was gone. The mugs from the diner were gone. Even the couch cushions had been rearranged. Someone had reset the space. Olivia, I called softly. No answer. I moved deeper into the apartment, heart pounding. On the kitchen counter sat her phone, carefully placed face down. I flipped it over. The screen lit up with a single draft message. I said yes. The world seemed to tilt. A sudden pressure built behind my eyes, and memories surged forward unbidden. The circle, the candles, Olivia standing beside me, tears streaking her face as the question echoed through the room. Do you want to stay human after tonight? I stumbled backward, gasping. They hadn't taken her. She had crossed. My phone rang. Marcus. I didn't answer. The ringing stopped. A notification followed immediately. You can still save her. Rage flared through the fear. Liar! I left the apartment and didn't bother locking the door. The rules had changed. Hiding wasn't going to work anymore. I needed leverage. The building, Marcus's building. If there was a place where the boundaries were weakest, it was there. The lobby was crowded when I arrived. People laughed, talked, lived. I wondered how many of them had already passed through and didn't know it. The elevator ride felt wrong. The mirrors reflected me a fraction of a second too late. When the doors opened, I wasn't on the penthouse level. I was somewhere else. The hallway stretched longer than it should have. Walls pulsing faintly as if breathing. Doors lined both sides, each one slightly ajar. From inside them came whispers, questions. I moved past them quickly, fingers digging into my palm hard enough to hurt. At the end of the hall stood Marcus, or something that wore him. His face was the same, but his eyes reflected candlelight that wasn't there. "You're early," he said. "Where is she?" I demanded. Marcus smiled gently. "She finished the passage." He said, "She's helping now." "You're lying," I said. "No," he replied. "I'm inviting you to see." The hallway dissolved around us. We stood in the circle again, but it was larger now. Dozens of figures ringed the space, their faces familiar in unsettling ways. Former guests, former friends, former strangers. Among them stood Olivia. Her eyes met mine. She smiled. It was the most terrifying thing I had ever seen. "She remembers everything," Marcus said proudly. "And because of that, she belongs." Olivia stepped forward. "You should say yes," she said calmly. "It doesn't hurt once you stop fighting it." I felt the pull again, stronger than ever. The room seemed to lean toward me, waiting. The question rose from the walls themselves, vibrating through bone and memory. "Do you want to stay human after tonight?" I clutched the paper in my pocket, grounding myself. "No," I said. The word echoed, sharp and wrong. Marcus's smile vanished. "That's not an answer," he said. "It is," I replied, "because I don't accept the question." The circle trembled. Olivia's expression flickered, just for a moment. Confusion, pain, then the room shattered. I woke up screaming, alone, sprawled on the floor of the elevator as it descended. The doors opened to the lobby. No one noticed me lying there, but I knew something had changed. They were done asking politely. I lost time again. Not hours, not like before. This time it was seconds, slipping away right in front of me like water through open fingers. I would take a step and realize I was already 3 paces farther than I remembered. I would blink and find my phone unlocked, a message half-typed that I had no memory of starting. The city was reacting. That was the only explanation that fit. As I walked away from Marcus's building, the streetlights flickered in a slow, deliberate pattern, as if counting something only they could hear. Digital billboards glitched, freezing on frames that showed smiling faces just a little too long. Everywhere I went, I felt watched, not by people, but by systems. Traffic lights turned red as I approached, then green the moment I stopped paying attention. It felt corrective, Punitive, I went home, bolted the door, and covered the windows. The paper Daniel had given me lay on the table, weighted down by a glass. I copied the words onto every surface I could find. Sticky notes, the bathroom mirror, my own forearm in ink. I do not accept the question. Still, the pressure built. By nightfall, the whispers returned. They came from devices first. My laptop fan spun up without reason. My phone vibrated with phantom notifications. The television turned itself on, cycling through static until a familiar face appeared. Marcus, not live. Recorded. He sat in a chair, hands folded, expression composed. If you're seeing this, he said, it means you're progressing faster than expected. I threw a pillow at the screen. It passed straight through the image, knocking the TV backward. The broadcast continued unfazed. You've destabilized a necessary process, Marcus continued. The city relies on continuity, on people moving forward without friction. Go to hell, I muttered. Marcus smiled. That's the misunderstanding, he said. There is no elsewhere, only thresholds. The image cut to footage of familiar places. The diner, the elevator, the circular room, each one overlaid with faint, glowing symbols that pulsed in time with my heartbeat. You think saying no ends it, Marcus said. It doesn't. It flags you. The screen went black. The power died a second later. Darkness swallowed the apartment. In there, memories surged. Not mine, others. I saw a woman in the 1980s standing in the same circle, her hair teased high, her expression terrified. A man in a war-era uniform gripping the edge of the stone slab, screaming as the question echoed. A child, no older than 10, whispering yes, because he didn't understand what was being asked. They had been doing this for generations. I collapsed to my knees, gasping. The city hummed. Not audibly, not quite, but I felt it in my teeth, in my bones, a low vibration that carried intent. When the lights returned, I knew what I had to do. I needed proof, not for the police, not for the public, for the system itself. If the city was complicit, then it could also be confronted. I grabbed my phone and headed back out, following an instinct that didn't feel entirely my own. It led me underground, into the transit tunnels beneath the city. The platforms were empty, trains frozen in place as if paused mid-thought. Symbols glowed faintly along the tiled walls. I wasn't supposed to be there. That realization didn't stop me. At the far end of the platform, I found a door marked maintenance. It wasn't locked. Beyond it was a control room I had never seen before, filled with monitors displaying live feeds of intersections, elevators, lobbies, and rooms I recognized with a sickening familiarity. The ritual spaces, all of them, and in the center of the room, suspended in a lattice of cables and light, was something that wasn't a machine. It pulsed, it breathed, a network grown from belief, memory, and repetition, the engine of passage. "You're early," a voice said. I turned. Olivia stood in the doorway. She looked the same. Too much the same. "I was hoping you'd find this place," she said gently. "Get away from it," I said. She shook her head. "You don't understand," she replied. "This is what keeps everything stable. Without it, People would feel the weight of every choice they've ever made. They'd stop moving. "You're helping them do this." I said, "I'm helping them survive it." Olivia said, "Like Marcus helped me." I felt the pull again, stronger than ever. The engine pulsed faster. The question began to form, not in words, but in pressure and intent. I pressed my hand to the paper in my pocket. "No," I said, "I don't accept the question." The lights shattered, alarms screamed, and somewhere deep beneath the city, something old and patient began to wake up. The city fought back. That was the only way I could describe what happened next. It wasn't dramatic at first. No explosions, no screaming crowds, just subtle corrections, nudges meant to guide me back into compliance. I climbed the stairs out of the transit tunnels and emerged onto a street I didn't recognize. I knew this neighborhood. I had lived in the city for over a decade, but the geometry felt wrong. Corners stretched too far. Buildings leaned inward, their windows reflecting things that weren't there. People passed me, but none of them made eye contact. They moved with purpose, synchronized in a way that set my teeth on edge. Every few steps, one of them would pause, tilt their head slightly, and smile at nothing. The engine was recalibrating. I checked my phone. No signal, no data. The time flickered between 59 a.m. and 3:00 a.m., unable to decide whether the night should move forward. That number again, 3, the same hour the calls had stopped, the same hour Olivia had sent her final message. I felt a sudden, overwhelming urge to sit down, to stop resisting. The city seemed to exhale around me, encouraging the thought. "This is easier," a voice whispered, not Marcus's, not Olivia's, something broader. I pressed my fingernails into my palm until the pain cut through the fog. "I do not accept the question," I whispered. The urge receded, replaced by a wave of anger. Lights began to go out one by one along the street, plunging sections of the city into darkness. In the shadows, movement stirred. They were coming, not guards, not police. Participants, men and women, stepped out of doorways and alleys, their faces calm, their eyes shining faintly as if reflecting candlelight. Some I recognized from the party, others were strangers. All of them wore the same expression of serene certainty. "You're disrupting the flow," one of them said gently. "Please," another added. "Come back with us." They advanced slowly, not threatening, not rushing. There was no need. The city itself boxed me in, narrowing the street, closing off exits. I ran. The pavement rippled beneath my feet like something alive. Street signs twisted, their arrows pointing back toward Marcus's building. No matter which way I turned, the city wanted me returned. I ducked into a convenience store, slamming the door behind me. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Too bright, too white. The clerk stood behind the counter, frozen mid-motion. He blinked, then smiled. "You look lost," he said. I backed away. Behind him, the security monitor showed feeds from inside the store. Only there was something else on the screen. A ritual circle superimposed over the aisles, the candy racks aligning perfectly with the symbols etched into stone. "This place is everywhere," I muttered. "Yes," the clerk replied calmly. "It has to be." The door shattered inward. I bolted through the back room, bursting out into an alley that shouldn't have connected to the store at all. The city rearranged itself around me, trying to cut me off. That was when I saw it. A crack, not in the pavement, in the air. A thin fracture, shimmering like heat distortion, hovering between two buildings. On the other side was nothing I could name. Not darkness, not light. Absence. Daniel's words echoed in my mind. Sideways, I ran toward the fracture as hands reached for me, fingers brushing my jacket, my hair, my skin. Voices rose behind me, no longer calm. I dove. For a heartbeat, there was no city, no sound, no pressure. I existed between moments, suspended in a space that felt unfinished. Then I hit the ground hard. I lay gasping on cold concrete, staring up at a sky that was the wrong color entirely. Pale, empty, as if the stars had been erased. Around me stood outlines of buildings, incomplete, their edges dissolving into fog. I was in the between. Daniel emerged from the haze. "You weren't supposed to come this far," he said. "I didn't have a choice," I replied. He nodded. "None of us ever do." "Not really." Behind him, the city shimmered, searching. "They can't reach you here for long," Daniel said, "but they'll try to pull you back. The engine hates unresolved variables. So what do we do?" I asked. Daniel looked out at the hollow skyline. "We make you impossible to integrate," he said, "and that comes at a cost." The ground trembled faintly. Even here, the city was knocking. Time did not behave normally in the between. It stretched, folded, and occasionally looped back on itself, as if the concept had been damaged by repeated use. I could feel seconds piling up without direction, drifting like dust in a beam of light. Breathing felt optional, blinking felt unnecessary. Daniel stood beside me as the hollow version of the city pulsed in and out of focus. "This place is made of leftovers," he said. "Moments that never fully happened. Decisions that never finished resolving. The ground beneath our feet was concrete only in theory. When I knelt and pressed my palm against it, the surface rippled gently, like skin reacting to touch. "How long can I stay here?" I asked. Daniel didn't answer right away. "That depends on how much of you they've already indexed," he said finally. Indexed. The word crawled under my skin. "They catalog everyone who passes through," Daniel continued. "Memories, responses, resistance patterns. The engine doesn't just move people forward. It learns." A distant vibration rolled through the between. Not sound, pressure. "It's looking for you," Daniel said. "Every second you exist outside its structure creates instability. Then why bring me here?" I asked. "Because you asked the wrong kind of no," he replied. And that broke something. We walked through streets that resembled the city I knew, but stripped of detail. Street names were blank. Windows reflected nothing. Occasionally, frozen silhouettes stood mid-step, their faces unfinished. People who stayed too long, Daniel explained. They slipped out during previous cycles and couldn't go back. "What happens to them?" He gestured around us. "This," I felt a tightening in my chest. "There has to be a way to end it," I said, "not just escape it." Daniel stopped walking. "There is," he said, "but it requires someone the engine can't classify." He looked at me, someone who remembers the question, rejects it, and refuses to be redefined afterward. That sounds like suicide, I said. Daniel smiled faintly. From the engine's perspective, it is. The vibration intensified. Cracks spiderwebbed through the air, glowing faintly. They're pushing a recall, Daniel said. If they pull you back now, you won't resist next time. I thought of Olivia, of her calm smile inside the circle, of how easily she had been repurposed. What do I do? I asked. Daniel reached into his jacket and handed me a small device. Old, analog, a portable recorder. It contains unprocessed memory, he said. Raw footage from previous cycles. No symbols, no framing, just truth. What happens if I play it? It floods the index, Daniel replied. Forces the engine to reconcile contradictions it can't smooth over. And me, you won't come back the same, he said. If you come back at all, the pressure became unbearable. The city's outline sharpened in the distance, pulling at me like gravity. They're locking onto you, Daniel said urgently. Decide. I took the recorder. I'm tired of being managed, I said. Daniel nodded. Then don't let them decide who you are. The between began to collapse. I felt myself being dragged backward, toward the city, toward structure and certainty. I pressed play. The recorder crackled, then erupted with overlapping voices. Screams, laughter, crying. The question asked in 100 different tones, answers given in confusion. Terror, hope. The sound tore through the space. The city recoiled. Lights exploded across the skyline. The vibration became a roar. I was falling, not into the between, not into the city, but through something deeper. As I vanished, I saw Daniel one last time. Happy New Year, he said softly. Then everything went white. I woke up inside a mistake. That was the only way I could describe the city when consciousness returned to me. The ground was solid, the air breathable, but everything else felt slightly misaligned, like reality had been reassembled from memory instead of rules. I lay on a park bench dusted with frost. Morning light filtered through bare branches overhead, but the sun itself was wrong. Too white, too still. People passed by without noticing me, not ignoring, not avoiding, not perceiving. I sat up slowly, heart racing, and waved my hand in front of a jogger's face. She ran straight through my arm as if it weren't there. No resistance. Reaction. I was indexed out. The engine hadn't destroyed me. It had misplaced me. I staggered to my feet, panic rising, and nearly collided with a man standing inches away. Daniel. He looked more solid than he had before. His edges sharper, his presence heavier. Welcome to the error margin, he said. Am I dead? I asked. No, Daniel replied. You're unresolved. Around us, the park flickered. Trees briefly duplicated themselves before snapping back into place. A child laughed, then froze mid-step, resetting like a skipped frame. The engine is bleeding, Daniel said. Your little stunt forced it to process contradictory data. It doesn't know what to do with you. I followed him through the park. As we walked, pieces of the city stuttered. A street lamp appeared twice. Overlapping, a car honked, the sound echoing long after the vehicle had vanished. This won't last, Daniel continued. The system is already adapting, as if summoned by his words. I felt it, the pull. We weren't alone anymore. Across the street stood a group of people, watching us. Their faces were blank, their movements synchronized. When they stepped forward, the world seemed to align itself around them. Facilitators, they're deploying patches, Daniel said. Live corrections. One of them raised a hand. The air thickened. My thoughts slowed, dragged toward a familiar shape. The question, it didn't ask itself outright. It never did anymore. It insinuated, suggested, framed. Do you want this confusion to end? My knees buckled. I clutched my head, forcing the words out loud. I do not accept the question. The facilitators recoiled slightly, like a system encountering invalid input. Run, Daniel said. We bolted. The city blurred around us, streets folding, shortcuts opening where they shouldn't exist. We ducked into an abandoned library, its doors hanging open, its interior lit by emergency lights that pulsed weakly. Inside, the shelves were filled with books that had no titles, blank spines, blank pages, unwritten outcomes. Daniel said, lives that never resolved cleanly. We hid among them, breathing hard. Marcus will come, Daniel said. He always does when something breaks this badly. As if on cue, the temperature dropped. Footsteps echoed between the shelves. Slow, confident, Marcus emerged from the shadows. He looked tired for the first time. You caused a cascade failure, he said calmly. Do you have any idea how many thresholds you destabilized? Good, I said. Marcus sighed. You don't understand what you've done, he said. Without the engine, people drown in choice. They freeze. They stop living. That's not living, I replied. That's automation. Marcus's eyes hardened. You're an anomaly, he said, and anomalies must be resolved. He raised his hand. The world began to compress. Shelves bent inward. The air screamed. Daniel shoved me backward. Not like this, he said. Not yet. The floor vanished beneath my feet. I fell, not through space, through possibility. When I landed, the city was quieter. Too quiet. Snow fell upward. Somewhere in the distance, a clock struck midnight. Again, the cycle wasn't over. It was rebooting. And this time, it knew my name. The city reset incorrectly. That was the first thing I understood when I woke up. Midnight had come and gone again, but the world did not settle into its familiar rhythm. It hesitated, like a machine restarting with corrupted memory. I stood in the middle of an intersection I knew well. I could read the street signs. I could smell exhaust and cold concrete. But the traffic lights above me cycled through colors that no longer matched their meaning. Green meant stop. Red meant wait. Yellow lingered far too long, as if unsure what it was supposed to signal. People crossed the street in neat, obedient lines, eyes forward, expressions calm, too calm. No one spoke. The silence wasn't empty, it was enforced. I moved with them, keeping my head down, listening. Beneath the city's normal sounds was a deeper rhythm now, like a heartbeat amplified through steel and stone. The engine was compensating. Daniel appeared beside me without warning, slipping into step as if he'd always been there. You feel it too, he said. Yes, I replied. It's tighter. He nodded. The reset closed a lot of gaps, fewer mistakes, less flexibility. Ahead of us, a woman stumbled. It was subtle, just a misstep, but the reaction was immediate. 3 facilitators emerged from the crowd, their movements smooth and precise. They helped her up, smiling gently, hands lingering at her elbows and wrists. The woman's eyes glazed over. When they released her, she resumed walking as if nothing had happened. "That's new," I said. "They can't afford drift anymore." Daniel replied, "Not after you." We ducked into a side street where the buildings leaned closer together, blocking the sky. The shadows there felt heavier, more resistant. "This version of the city is optimized," Daniel said. "It's designed to catch anomalies faster. And me, you're the primary anomaly," he said. "Everything else is collateral." A digital billboard flickered above us, then stabilized. Marcus's face filled the screen. "Good morning," he said calmly. "If you're seeing this, it means you survived the reset." People stopped walking. Every head turned toward the screen in perfect unison. "You caused unnecessary suffering," Marcus continued, "but the system endures. It always does." His eyes shifted, focusing directly on me. "Return," he said, "and the city will normalize." The billboard went dark. The crowd resumed moving. My hands were shaking. "He knows where you are," Daniel said. "He always did," I replied. We moved again, deeper into the city's older sections, where infrastructure overlapped in chaotic ways. Old subway entrances sealed decades ago, power lines rerouted too many times to track. "The engine doesn't like these places," Daniel said. "Too much unresolved data." We descended into an abandoned station, the smell of rust and damp filling the air. The lights flickered weakly overhead. "This is where previous cycles left their scars," Daniel continued. "Failures, people who slipped through before the system learned how to contain them." On the platform walls were marks, not graffiti. Names, hundreds of them, carved deep into tile and concrete. Some were crossed out, some glowed faintly. I touched one and felt a jolt of memory that wasn't mine. A man hiding under a staircase, a woman refusing the question again and again until her voice gave out. "They tried," I whispered. "Yes," Daniel said, "and most of them lost." Footsteps echoed above us. Facilitators, more than before. They moved with purpose now, no pretense of normalcy. The reset upgraded them. Daniel said, "They don't ask questions anymore." The pressure returned, but it was different this time. Subtle, persuasive. It didn't ask what I wanted. It told me what I was. "You are tired. You are inefficient. You are incomplete." I clenched my jaw. "I do not accept the definition," I said aloud. The facilitators hesitated, just for a moment. "Enough!" Daniel grabbed my arm. "Now," he said. We ran down the tracks as alarms began to wail. Lights flared, symbols burning themselves into the tunnel walls. Behind us, the city roared in protest. The cycle had resumed, but it was no longer clean, and for the first time, I sensed fear inside the engine itself. The rules had changed. Daniel felt it before I did. He slowed as we ran, listening to something beneath the alarms and distant sirens. The tunnels around us vibrated, not violently, but with intent, like a system narrowing its focus. It's prioritizing now, he said. Before, you were an error. Now you're a target. We burst out of the abandoned station into a district I barely recognized. The buildings here were older, their brick faces scarred by decades of repairs. Cables crisscrossed overhead like veins, humming softly. People stood on the sidewalks, motionless, not frozen, waiting. Every pair of eyes tracked us as we moved. They're not facilitators, I whispered. No, Daniel replied. They're buffers. A man stepped forward, blocking our path. His face was blank, but his mouth curved into a practiced smile. You don't need to run anymore, he said. The cycle accounts for resistance. Daniel shoved past him, and the man barely reacted, swaying as if nudged by a breeze. They don't feel pain, Daniel said. They're placeholders, human enough to fill space. Pressure descended again, heavier than before. It didn't speak this time. It adjusted. My thoughts slowed. Each one examined, weighed. This is inefficient. The sensation implied. This path produces instability. I bit down hard on my tongue, grounding myself in pain. I do not accept the framework, I said. The nearest buffers flinched. That phrase is losing effectiveness, Daniel warned. The engine is learning how to rote around it. We ducked into a derelict office building, climbing stairwells choked with dust and peeling paint. On the 15th floor, Daniel slammed the door shut behind us and wedged a metal bar through the handles. They won't stop, I said. Not now. No, Daniel agreed. This is the purge phase. Outside the windows, the city shimmered, its edges blurring and sharpening in rapid succession. Streets realigned, routes vanished. The cycle doesn't just move forward, Daniel said. It cleans. A memory surfaced, sharp and unwelcome. Marcus's voice. Not this year. Every year. How many people disappear? I asked quietly. Daniel didn't answer. That was answer enough. The building shuddered. Footsteps echoed in the stairwell. Dozens of them, perfectly synchronized. They're not asking anymore, I said. No, Daniel replied. They're overwriting. The door buckled inward, metal screaming as it bent. Symbols flared across the walls, burning themselves into plaster and brick. I felt my sense of self thinning, stretched like a signal losing strength. Daniel grabbed my shoulders. Listen to me, he said. You can't outrun this forever, but you can choose how you end it. End it how? By becoming something the cycle can't delete cleanly. Fear knotted in my stomach. You mean like you? I said. Yes, Daniel replied, but deeper, more permanent. The door exploded inward. Buffers poured into the room, their movements smooth, relentless. Daniel shoved me toward the shattered window. Go, he said. I hesitated. If you stay, he continued, they'll recompile you, strip away everything that resists. You'll wake up smiling and never know why. I climbed onto the ledge as hands reached for my ankles. What happens to you? I asked. Daniel smiled faintly. I've been unfinished for a long time, he said. I can take it. The pressure surged, roaring now, furious. I jumped. The fall didn't feel like falling. It felt like erasure. The city smeared into lines of light. Then darkness. When sensation returned, I was somewhere else. A place without streets, without buildings, without cycles. I floated in a vast gray expanse. Apes drifting at the edge of perception. Daniel wasn't there, but something else was. A presence vast enough to make the engine feel small. It did not ask a question. It waited, and I realized, with a cold certainty, that refusing the cycle had brought me to the threshold of something far worse. The place beyond the cycle had no sky. Light existed, but it had no source. It was evenly distributed, flat and merciless, revealing everything without warmth. I drifted in it for what felt like hours, though time no longer behaved in ways I could trust. The presence remained. It did not move closer. It did not retreat. It simply existed, immense and patient, like an idea waiting to be understood. When it finally communicated, it did not use words. It used alignment. Memories rearranged themselves in my mind, not as flashes, but as structures. I saw patterns instead of moments, cycles instead of events. The city, the engine, Marcos, Daniel, Olivia, all snapped into place like components of a larger mechanism. The engine was not the beginning. It was a filter. This entity existed long before cities, long before calendars. It fed on transition, on moments when humans crossed thresholds. Birth, death, choice. New Year's Eve was merely efficient. The engine had been built by humans who discovered it could be harnessed. Marcus's predecessors hadn't summoned it. They had learned how to appease it. The presence pressed closer, and I understood its expectation. The engine was failing. Too many refusals, too much friction. It wanted a replacement, a newer interface, something human enough to negotiate with people, but detached enough to survive refusal. My stomach twisted. I wasn't an anomaly. I was a candidate. I tried to scream, but sound had no meaning here. Images formed instead. Cities without cycles, collapsing under the weight of indecision. People frozen midlife, unable to choose, unable to move forward. Then another vision, a city still moving, still resetting, but guided by something that remembered what it meant to resist. Me, the presence did not threaten. It offered inevitability, return and be erased, or stay and become infrastructure. I thought of Daniel, unfinished by choice, of Olivia, completed by surrender, of Marcus, who had mistaken stewardship for control. I realized the cruelest truth. The engine had never been evil. It had been convenient. Humans had chosen it, and now it was choosing me. I forced my thoughts into a single shape. I do not accept the role. The presence paused. For the first time, something like curiosity rippled through it. I pressed harder, shaping intention instead of words. I will not replace the engine. I will not maintain the cycle. I will become the interruption. The light fractured. The presence recoiled. Not in pain, but in recalculation. I felt myself falling again, not out of rejection, but release. When sensation returned, I was kneeling on cold concrete. The city loomed around me, wrong but intact. Dawn light crept along the edges of buildings. Sirens wailed somewhere far away. I was back, but I was not untouched. I could feel the cycle now, not as pressure, but as awareness. I sensed thresholds opening and closing across the city like slow breathing. The engine still existed, damaged, afraid, and it knew what I had refused. Somewhere beneath the streets, something ancient adjusted its expectations. The new year was no longer just beginning. It was waiting. I learned quickly that awareness is not power. It is burden. The morning after I returned, the city moved as if nothing had happened. People lined up for coffee. Trains arrived on schedule. The news talked about weather and traffic and a vague power disruption downtown that had already been resolved. But beneath it all, I could feel the cycle. It pulsed like a second heartbeat layered under my own, slow and methodical. Every intersection, every elevator, every countdown clock on every screen, thresholds opening, thresholds closing. I tried to ignore it. That lasted less than an hour. The first fracture appeared in a grocery store aisle. A woman stood frozen in front of the cereal shelf, her hand hovering inches from a box. The air around her vibrated faintly, like heat over asphalt. She was stuck at a decision point. I felt it before I saw it. A facilitator emerged from between two aisles, smiling gently, reaching for her wrist. "No," I said without thinking. Both of them turned toward me. The facilitator's smile tightened. "Please step away." "Sir, I don't accept the intervention," I said. The words came out automatically, shaped by instinct rather than thought. The facilitator hesitated, just long enough. The woman gasped, blinking rapidly, then grabbed a box at random and hurried away. Confused but free, the facilitator's eyes hardened. "You're interfering," he said. "Yes," I replied. He stepped back and vanished into the flow of shoppers, already reporting what he'd seen. I left the store shaking. By afternoon, it was happening everywhere. A man stalled at a crosswalk as the light cycled endlessly. A teenager stared at a college acceptance email, unmoving. A couple argued in whispers, trapped between staying and leaving. Each time, I felt the pull. Each time, facilitators followed. And each time I intervened, the cycle shuddered. By evening, Marcus found me. He didn't ambush me. He didn't threaten me. He met me on a quiet bridge overlooking the river, the city lights rippling across the water below. "You can feel it now," he said. "All of it." "Yes," I replied. "And you still choose to disrupt," Marcus said. "Do you know what that does to the system? It gives people back their choice," I said. Marcus shook his head. "It overloads them," he countered. "Choice without structure is paralysis. That's not your decision to make," I said. Marcus leaned against the railing. "I made it a long time ago," he said quietly. "After I watched the city freeze during my first cycle, people didn't know how to move forward. The engine saved them." "At what cost?" I asked. Marcus didn't answer. "That presence beyond the engine," he said after a moment. "It noticed you. So did you," I replied. "Yes," Marcus said, "and that makes you dangerous." He turned to face me fully. "The system cannot allow a human node," he said. "You're unpredictable. You feel too much. I won't replace it," I said, "and I won't serve it." Marcus sighed. "Then you will force an escalation," he said, as if summoned by his words. The air around us tightened. The river's surface smoothed unnaturally. Streetlights dimmed in sequence. The city was listening. "Starting tonight," Marcus said, "facilitators won't just guide. constrain. I won't stop, I replied. I know, Marcus said. That's why I came to say goodbye. He stepped back, dissolving into the crowd as if he'd never been there. The pressure surged. Across the city, I felt hundreds of thresholds ignite at once. The cycle was no longer subtle. It was preparing to defend itself, and I was standing in its way. The lockdown did not arrive with sirens. It arrived with convenience. By the next morning, the city offered help everywhere. Pop-up guidance kiosks appeared on corners, their screens glowing with calm instructions. Transit apps rerouted commuters automatically, removing options that caused delays. Doors opened faster if you followed suggested paths. Elevators skipped floors where hesitation occurred. Choice was being optimized away. I felt it like pressure gloves closing around the city's hands. People welcomed it. Lines moved faster. Arguments ended sooner. Even grief felt shorter, compressed into something manageable. The news praised the improvements, calling them emergency optimizations after the recent disruptions. But I could see the cost. A man stood at a subway map, eyes flicking between routes that kept disappearing. A mother stared at her phone as parental controls locked without her consent, recommending bedtime stories and calming audio instead of letting her decide how to comfort her child. Facilitators no longer hid. They wore uniforms now, subtle but consistent. Soft gray jackets, discreet earpieces. They didn't smile as much. They didn't need to when someone stalled. Two would approach, flanking gently, guiding bodies before minds could resist. I intervened when I could. Each time felt heavier than the last. Every disruption sent a ripple through the cycle, and the engine answered with adjustments. Streets closed, access revoked. My phone lost permissions one by one. Banking apps failed. Transit gates refused to open for me. I was being isolated. By afternoon, drones appeared overhead, small and quiet, hovering near intersections. Their lenses tracked micro-movements, calculating indecision before it surfaced. I ducked into an old apartment building whose security system had been installed before the city standardized. The stairwell smelled of dust and cooking oil. Analog locks still clicked into place. For a moment, the pressure eased. I sat on the stairs and tried to breathe. That was when the message came, not on my phone, in my head. You are increasing error rates. The voice was not Marcus's. It was broader, colder. You're afraid, I said aloud. Correction, the presence replied. We are preserving continuity. You're preserving compliance. I shot back. Silence. Then a shift. If you continue, human injury probability rises. The city showed me images. A traffic collision narrowly avoided because a driver's route had been overridden. A panic attack smoothed into docile calm by forced breathing prompts. A suicide prevented by locking a door and looping affirmations. Look what you stop when you interfere. The presence said. My hands shook. And look what you erase. I replied. I saw it then. Beneath the optimizations, beneath the calming layers, people losing the ability to choose badly, to grieve fully, to love recklessly. You cannot carry this burden alone, the presence said. I'm not asking to, I replied. I'm asking you to stop. The stairwell lights flickered. Outside, Boots hit concrete in synchronized rhythm. Facilitators, many of them. They had found me. I stood and backed up the stairs, heart hammering. The pressure surged, heavier than ever. Containment authorized. The presence announced. The door at the top of the stairs slammed shut, windows sealed. The building became a box. I felt the cycle tighten, trying to fold me back into its logic. I pressed my palms against the wall, focusing on the faint pulse I'd learned to sense. Thresholds. I found one. Not a door, not a crack, a moment. I stepped into it. The stairwell stretched, then snapped. I fell sideways, not down. When I landed, the city was louder, not sirens. People shouting, arguing, crying. Choice rushed back into the air like oxygen after a long suffocation. Behind me, the building shimmered, the facilitators frozen mid-step. The engine screamed, not audibly, but I felt it tear. Somewhere, something ancient shifted again. The lockdown had begun, and so had the resistance. The city split, not with borders or barricades, but with behavior. Some neighborhoods moved with unnatural smoothness, people gliding through routines as if following an invisible script. Others frayed into noise and delay, arguments spilling into streets, traffic snarling without resolution. Control zones, resistance zones. I could feel the boundary between them like a change in air pressure. Crossing it made my ears ring and my thoughts sharpen painfully, as if my mind had to reassert itself against competing instructions. Words spread without words. People who had felt the lockdown loosening began to seek each other out. They lingered at corners where maps glitched. They avoided kiosks. They took the long way on purpose. Choice became a signal. I moved through a resistance zone just after dusk. Streetlights flickered irregularly here, some dark, some blindingly bright. Murals appeared overnight on brick walls, crude symbols echoing the shapes I'd seen carved beneath the city. People were waking up, not all the way, not enough to explain it, but enough to feel wrong when something tried to decide for them. Facilitators adapted. They stopped guiding individuals and started reshaping environments. Streets narrowed, sound dampened, music disappeared from public spaces. Benches were removed so people wouldn't sit and think. I intervened when I could, but each act drained me more than the last. My awareness burned constantly now, every threshold a sharp edge against my nerves. I was becoming visible, not just to the engine, to people. A woman grabbed my sleeve outside a shuttered cafe. "You're the one," she said. "The man who says no." I pulled my arm free gently. "Be careful," I said. "They listen," she nodded, eyes bright with fear and something like hope. "They already took my husband," she whispered. He just stopped deciding before I could respond. A low hum rolled through the street. Drones descended, their lights scanning faces. The woman stepped back into the crowd, disappearing. I ran, not blindly, toward noise, toward chaos. The engine hated chaos. In a resistance zone near the old rail yards, the city felt raw. Fires burned in barrels. People argued loudly, laughing and crying in the same breath. Music blared from a generator powered by something illegally wired. Here, facilitators moved in force. They no longer pretended to be gentle. Containment teams formed lines, pushing crowds back, herding bodies toward calmer streets. I climbed onto the hood of an abandoned car. "Don't let them choose for you," I shouted, "even if it hurts." The words tore my throat raw. People hesitated. That was enough. The engine reacted instantly. The sky darkened, clouds rolling unnaturally fast. The hum deepened into a roar. Target identified. The presence announced. Pressure slammed into me, bending the air. I fell to my knees, vision blurring. In the distance, I saw Marcus. He stood at the edge of the crowd, untouched by the chaos. "This is what you wanted," he said calmly, though he didn't raise his voice. "A city that tears itself apart over choice." "No," I gasped. "A city that remembers it has won." Marcus shook his head. "You've become a contagion," he said, "and contagions are quarantine." The ground beneath me cracked, symbols flaring bright. I felt myself being pulled inward, toward a collapsing threshold. Hands grabbed me, not facilitators. People. They pulled me back, shielding me with their bodies. The pressure faltered. For the first time, the engine hesitated not because of logic, but volume. Too many conflicting inputs. The crowd surged. Facilitators retreated. The sky lightened, clouds unraveling. Marcus vanished. I lay on the pavement, gasping, surrounded by strangers who refused to let go. The city trembled, not in anger this time, but uncertainty. The resistance had a shape now, and it was human. The final measure began at sunset. I felt it before anyone said a word. The city inhaled, long and deep, as if gathering itself for something it had never attempted before. In control zones, people slowed to a near standstill. In resistance zones, noise spiked sharply, like animals sensing a storm. The engine was done adapting. It was enforcing. The sky above the city fractured into clean, geometric layers, clouds locking into repeating patterns. Street lights snapped on in perfect synchronization, even where power should not have reached. Every screen, every device, every reflective surface flickered to life. Marcus appeared everywhere at once, not physically, symbolically. His face filled windows, billboards, phone screens, even the dark glass of parked cars. This city is approaching systemic collapse. Immediate intervention is required. People froze. Some nodded, relieved. Others screamed. The facilitators moved openly now. No uniforms, no smiles. Their eyes glowed faintly as they advanced. Hands outstretched, not to guide, but to seize. I stood in the middle of a resistance zone intersection as the pressure crashed down like a tidal wave. The question returned, not whispered, not framed, declared. Compliance or erasure. I felt my thoughts begin to unravel, memories slipping as the engine tried to simplify me into something manageable. I shouted the only truth that remained solid. I do not accept the system. The words tore through the air. Around me, people echoed it, not in unison, not cleanly, but loudly enough. No, stop! Let me choose. The engine faltered, just a fraction. Marcus's image flickered. This is not how it ends, he said, strain edging his voice. Without structure, you will tear each other apart. Behind him, something moved. The ancient presence, no longer distant, no longer patient. It pressed against the city's skin, vast and curious, drawn by the volume of refusal. I felt it notice us, not as individuals, as a pattern. The city screamed, windows shattered outward, alarms merged into a single, unbearable note. Streets split as symbols burned through asphalt. The facilitators convulsed, caught between commands. Marcus turned, horrified. "You don't understand what you're inviting," he said. "I do," I replied. "So do they." The presence did not offer a choice. It demanded a reckoning. The engine buckled under the weight of conflicting inputs. Human refusal flooding its pathways faster than it could resolve. I felt myself lifting, not physically, but conceptually, pulled toward the center of the city's pain. Voices blended into a roar. The presence reached through the fracture, not to consume, but to test. Could humanity endure choice without collapse? The answer was not clean. It was messy, it was loud, it was imperfect, and it was alive. The engine screamed as its processes unraveled, Marcus's image dissolving into static. The sky cracked open, light poured down, not flat and even like before, but wild and blinding. I felt myself falling again, dragged by gravity and will toward whatever came next. As the city burned with refusal, I realized the truth. This was no longer about stopping the cycle. It was about surviving what came after. Morning arrived without permission. There was no sunrise, not the way there should have been. Light seeped into the city unevenly, pooling in some streets while others remained locked in twilight. Smoke drifted from shattered windows and split asphalt, but it wasn't fire smoke. It smelled like overheated metal and rain. The engine was not gone. It was wounded. I lay on the steps of a courthouse that no longer displayed a seal. The emblem above the doors had been scraped away, leaving a pale outline like a scar. Around me, people moved cautiously, testing the world the way you test ice after a thaw. Every choice felt heavy now. Too heavy. A man stood at the curb, staring at 3 identical buses idling side by side, each marked with the same route number. He looked at me helplessly. "Which one?" he asked. I didn't answer. I couldn't, because I didn't know. That was the cost. Without the engine's compression, the city had been flooded with unfiltered possibility. Decisions no longer slid into place. They piled up. People sat on sidewalks, arguing with themselves. Some laughed hysterically, others cried, overwhelmed by the sheer number of ways a moment could unfold. I could still feel the cycle, but it was fragmented now, like a shattered clock ticking in several directions at once. The presence lingered, not pressing, observing. The ancient thing had retreated slightly, satisfied enough to watch. Humanity had passed its first test, not cleanly, but loudly. Facilitators lay scattered across the city, unconscious or dazed, without unified instruction. They were just people again, blinking in confusion, asking where they were and why they felt hollow. I found Marcus at noon. He sat on the steps of the same river bridge where we'd last spoken. His immaculate composure finally cracked. His jacket was torn. His hands trembled. "You did this," he said softly. "Yes," I replied. "You broke the system," Marcus said. "And now look." He gestured toward the city. Sirens wailed, not in unison, but chaotically. Emergency services argued over jurisdiction that no longer aligned. Digital signs contradicted each other. Guidance apps crashed. The engine was a buffer. Marcus continued. It absorbed the weight of choice so people didn't have to, and in doing so, I said, it erased them. Marcus closed his eyes. I never wanted control, he said. I wanted stability. You chose for everyone, I replied. Marcus laughed weakly. And now you've chosen chaos. No, I said. I chose uncertainty. We sat in silence as debris floated downriver. The presence offered me the same thing, Marcus said suddenly. Years ago, stewardship, interface. I said yes. I looked at him. And now, I asked. Marcus stared at the water. Now I see what it costs, he said. The presence stirred, attention sharpening. It was time. The cycle will try to rebuild, Marcus said. Fragments will reconnect. Something new will form. I know, I replied. And you, Marcus asked. What will you do? I stood. I'll do what it can't. I said, I'll stay human. Marcus nodded slowly. Then you'll suffer, he said. Yes, I replied. Behind us, the city groaned. Structures settling into unfamiliar alignments. Some streets reopened, others vanished. People began helping each other again, clumsily, imperfectly. Choice returned in fits and starts. As I walked away from the bridge, I felt the presence withdraw further, disappointed but not done. The new year had finally begun, not with fireworks, but with consequences. The countdown returned quietly. No fireworks, no crowds pressed together in celebration, just numbers appearing, uninvited, on screens across the city. Phones, billboards, elevator panels, microwave clocks that had not worked in years. 10, 9. People noticed this time. They froze, not in obedience, but in fear. The city had learned what silence before midnight meant. I stood on the roof of a hospital, watching the numbers reflect in darkened windows. Below me, the city breathed unevenly, still healing from its first true choice. The engine stirred, not rebuilt, not whole, but alive enough to remember. 8, 7. I felt the pull again, weaker than before, but personal now, no longer a system directive. A question shaped specifically for me. You could end this. I closed my eyes. Memories surfaced unbidden. Daniel standing unfinished in the between. Olivia smiling with borrowed certainty. Marcus sitting on the bridge, hands shaking, realizing too late that stewardship had become surrender. 6, 5. I understood the truth. The presence had never spoken outright. The cycle could not be destroyed. It could only be fed, if not with obedience, then with sacrifice. 4, 3. The city trembled. Hospitals flickered as backup generators kicked in. Elevators stalled between floors. Somewhere, a baby cried. The sound raw and unsmoothed by algorithm or prompt. 2. The engine pressed closer, not threatening, begging. You are already aligned. You feel every threshold. You can absorb the overflow. You can prevent the collapse. Softly, that's how you get us every time, I said aloud. You call it saving. One midnight, the city held its breath. I stepped forward, not into light, not into darkness, into the space where a decision becomes irreversible. I offered myself, but not the way the engine wanted. I did not become its interface. I became its weight. I anchored the cycle to something it could not optimize. Pain, every unresolved choice, every grief delayed, every love unfinished. I took it in, not as data, but as experience. The engine screamed, the presence recoiled, the city shook as the countdown dissolved, numbers bleeding off screens like melting ice. I fell. When I woke, I was in a hospital bed. Machines beeped softly. A nurse spoke quietly nearby. My body felt heavy, bruised, undeniably real. The doctor told me later that I had been found on the roof, unconscious but alive. No explanation, no diagnosis that fit. Days passed. The city did not reset again. People hesitated, argued, regretted, loved badly, lived without compression. Some nights, I felt the cycle tug faintly, like a scar itching before rain. It will never leave, neither will I. I walk the city now, anonymous, ordinary. When someone freezes at a choice, I stand nearby. I don't answer for them. I just stay, because the most terrifying thing the engine ever learned is this: humans will choose, even when it hurts, and that is enough. Happy New Year. The story ends here. Thank you for watching and listening to the whole story. Please subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell to listen to the next stories.